If you're like me, then you've had a lot of political conversations with friends and family that feel like talking to a brick wall. I used to think that winning people over meant overwhelming them with facts and logic. And yet, my words never seemed to land, and I couldn't quite figure out why. The truth is, if you're relying on logic alone, you're only tapping into a fraction of your persuasive power. I didn't learn this insight from some self-help seminar. I learned it by studying ancient philosophy. So today, I want to help you get your message heard as effectively as possible by exploring the three key components of persuasion as laid out by the great ancient philosopher Aristotle. It's called the rhetoric triangle, and it has totally transformed the way that I approach political discussions. I'm very excited to share this with you. Let's get into it. Of all the elements of the rhetoric triangle, logos is probably the one that you're most familiar with. And yet, most people still go about it the wrong way. So what does logos mean, and how can you use it to become a master communicator? Well, to effectively use logos, you need two things. Number one, the other person needs to understand what you're trying to say. And number two, you need to understand what you are trying to say. If it sounds basic, that's because it is. But most people haven't even mastered the basics. Let's go through both of these components real quick. Number one, being understood. Over the past few months, I've had the chance to communicate with hundreds of thousands of people all over the world thanks to this YouTube channel. And if there's one thing that has become more and more obvious the longer I do this, it is that simply being understood is half the battle. In order for somebody to be convinced by your words, they need to understand them first. And if you assume that step is easy and you're not gonna have to put any effort into it, you're making a big mistake. Clarity is your top priority if you wanna be more persuasive. Now, there's an elephant in the room here. It's pretty hard to convey what you believe if you yourself haven't thought through your beliefs. Which brings me to the second component of logos: understanding yourself. The people with the most conviction have thought through their beliefs. They've questioned them at a very high level. Sounds like common sense, right? But yet again, most people don't actually do this because self-education is hard and life is busy. So, because I want my people to be as effective as possible, I created a leftist theory starter guide that's going to help you become smarter than all your friends without having to spend hours picking out what to read. If that interests you, click the first link in the description to get that free resource. So that's logos, logical argument. Logos is like the bass line in a song. It needs to be there, because without it, your song, your communication, will lack structure. But a bass line alone won't have anyone dancing. The ancients understood that rhetoric, the art of persuasion, has to be approached holistically. And that's where the other two components of the rhetoric triangle come in. Out of all three, pathos is the easiest to get wrong, but it's also super powerful when you get it right. So what is pathos and how do we use it? The word itself roughly translates to sympathy, but in the context of rhetoric, I would define pathos as an appeal to the audience. Specifically, when you employ pathos, you're appealing to the audience's emotions, their values, and their imagination. For example, I'm Catholic. So when I talk to other Catholics, other Christians, I know that we share a common set of values derived from the gospel message. Feed the hungry, care for the sick, turn the other cheek. If I can explain why I think those values are compatible with my political project, I can generally expect that they'll at least hear me out, because we are both invested in promoting those values. But there's also a danger to pathos when it's used wrong, and most people use it wrong. Too many leftists make the mistake of trying to browbeat people into morality, and it backfires. People hate to be scolded, so don't be a preachy nerd. The essence of pathos is to inspire people to live up to the ideals that they already believe in, rather than trying to make them conform to your worldview. For instance, freedom might be super important for one person, whereas for another person, equality is a more emotionally salient concept, and so on. Your job is to understand what the other person values and then frame your position in terms of their values. Let me give you an example. Let's say I was talking to a conservative about immigration. They're going to talk about drugs and gangsters and millions of unidentified people flooding into our country. Now, I could berate them and, oh, how could you say that? There's kids in cages. Or try to show them immigration statistics or something. But that's probably not going to be very effective, because it was never about the wall. It was never about immigration. It was about feeling unsafe. So any appeal that doesn't center safety is going to fall on deaf ears because safety is what they value most in this situation. So if you frame the conversation as a conflict between security and human rights, they're going to choose security. This is where most leftists give up and write people off as irredeemable bigots. But the good news is you don't have to frame the conversation this way. These are both good things. These people are not bad for wanting safety. It's just that right-wing politicians are the only ones who have been willing to acknowledge their fears and put forward a solution. So you just have to convince them that your political project could address their concerns better. It might go something like this. Yeah, I get it. We need to make sure our country is a safe place to live, and immigration is definitely a part of that. I guess I just think it's weird that none of these politicians want to talk about why these immigrants are coming in the first place. It's crazy, man. When you look into it, the government's been spending our tax money to destabilize these countries in Latin America for such a long time. Because that means multinational corporations can get their land and labor and resources for cheap. At the end of the day, they're the ones causing chaos. They're the ones making our country unsafe. Maybe if we let these people have their independence, they'd be able to build up their own country instead of trying to come to ours. Fair enough? Ultimately, pathos comes down to framing things in a way that's going to emotionally resonate with people. One part of that is appealing to their values, which I just went over. But there's another aspect of pathos which is so often ignored. If we can successfully tap this, then we will have something that no other political movement has. I'm talking about imagination. The ability to envision a better world has been slowly choked out of us. And yet, people are also increasingly fed up with the status quo, which means whoever captures the imagination of the masses will have so much enthusiasm behind them. So, okay, what does this mean practically? It means paint a picture. It means crafting appeals that do not just satisfy the intellect, but also touch the soul and delight the senses. I'll give you another example. Let's say you were talking about urban planning and public transit. You could say, I think we should change zoning laws and invest in public transit to create more high-density, walkable neighborhoods. It would stimulate local economies, promote community, and make cities more beautiful. Now, that's all true, but it makes the topic seem boring. Nobody is going to be inspired to fight for that. Let's add some pathos. I think we should invest in public transit systems and change zoning laws to create more high-density, walkable cities. Imagine how awesome it would be if you could walk home from work every day in the sun instead of being stuck in traffic. Imagine living within a couple blocks of all your friends. Imagine feeling like you actually knew your neighbors and could depend on them. Imagine if instead of miles of ugly highways and soulless chain stores, we had green spaces and fresh local food and small businesses that you could just pop into as you walked by instead of speeding past at 60 miles an hour. I think that'd be pretty awesome, don't you? If you can move people from skepticism and disinterest to genuine excitement, then you've done something that no other modern political movement can do. Now, tapping into that high-minded, optimistic, visionary headspace might not be something you're used to. I think the left has really lost the courage of our convictions over the past couple decades. But if we could rekindle some measure of boldness, some recognition that we truly could be architects of a new and radically better world, I think we'd have a lot more conviction. We have the resources to eliminate hunger, homelessness, poverty. We could cure diseases. We could explore space. We could heal the planet. It would be so tight if we won. And I don't think we give ourselves permission to think about that very often. At least I don't. Ethos is all about passion. Cold logic alone will never rally the masses. So just to summarize what we've learned so far, logos is logic. We use logos by deeply understanding our beliefs and then articulating those beliefs as clearly as possible. Pathos is passion. We use pathos by appealing to the audience's values, emotions, and imagination. If, as I said earlier, logos is the baseline that sets the foundation for effective rhetoric, then pathos is like the guitar or any other instrument that kind of sets the mood of the song and takes center stage. Both are essential. I saved ethos for last because I really believe in ethos. I think it is far and away the most powerful component of rhetoric, but it's also the least understood. So I want to spend a couple minutes explaining what ethos is and then give you the actionable steps to use it to become an absolutely magnetic communicator. Because if you've watched this far, you're probably the type of person that I can count on to actually implement it. But first, if we want to understand ethos, we have to understand how it relates to the other two components of rhetoric that I just discussed. You may have noticed that we have moved from the impersonal towards the personal. Logos is by definition universal. It is effective because it relies on abstract laws of logic that any reasonable person could observe. Whereas pathos is more tailored towards the sensibilities of the audience. There's a bias towards logos in public discourse because pathos and ethos don't scale well, which means that when you communicate with the people in your life, you actually have a powerful advantage over the talking heads that they listen to. Even though the Ben Shapiro's and Tucker Carlson's the world have infinitely more resources than you do. And that is that the people in your life actually know you. This is where ethos really shines. If logos is an appeal to logic and pathos is an appeal to the audience, then ethos is an appeal to the speaker. Ethos means that people judge a position based on the person that espouses it. It means that people associate the message with the messenger. It's very convenient to ignore this. It's very convenient to live in a world of intellectual abstraction. But let me ask you this. Can you expect to change the world if you can't even change yourself? Can you expect your values to be an inspiration to others when you don't even live them out yourself? Can you expect to win if you're playing half-hearted? These are tough questions. But if you want to make a real impact on the world, these are the questions you need to be asking. There's a lot of leftists who wish this was just about arguing. That would be a lot easier that way, but politics is not a logic puzzle. It requires actually getting to work. This is why I say that ethos is the hardest to deploy, but also the most effective. Because it's not about what you say. Ethos is about what you do, or more accurately, who you are. Being a living embodiment of your principles will give you that it factor, that unspoken riz. Because no matter what anyone says, you will know that your political process is transforming the world for the better and that you are living a principled life. And guess what? That quality is magnetic. It is intoxicating. I know it seems like our generation is apathetic, but I've talked to enough of you to know otherwise. Deep down, people are looking for something greater. They crave purpose. If you have any sense of mission in life, people will sense that and they will be drawn to it. I think some of us have fallen under this mistaken impression that we have to wait for some undefined point in the future when we have power. But each of us have power already. We have power over ourselves. We have the power to embody our values, even if that just means picking up trash on the sidewalk. When I say a better world is possible, I don't just mean that in an abstract way. I don't just mean hypothetically. I mean, I know it in my bones because I've seen it every day. I create a better world every day in some small way, however I can. I need you to understand we cannot wait for a revolution. We are the revolution. I understand I'm asking you to be an outlier, but maybe that's not such a bad thing. Everything in our society is designed to give you a cheap fix, but I think you know deep down you were not made to be a consumer. I think you know deep down that you are being asked to trade meaning for comfort. And I think you know deep down you don't want to make that trade. This is not the easy path, but if you want to lead a life that you can look back on with pride, devoting yourself to a higher cause is the only way. Meaning comes from mission. If you want to connect with and learn from other leftists who are on the same mission, who are fighting for a better world, then I'm happy to announce I'm building a platform where we can get organized to do that. I want this to be a place where we can hang out, strategize, and learn theory together. It's not out yet. I'm still building it. But if I've piqued your interest, just hit that first link in the description, download the reading guide I mentioned earlier, because when you do that, I get your email and I can let you know when it launches. I hope to see you there. A better world is possible.